We last left off in the last shir, Daf Chavtet Amud Bet. We learned just the Mishnah, and we started to try to unpack the distinction between Rashi's understanding of what does it mean that a lulav can become dried out and desiccated versus the Bali Tosafot's understanding of the exact same concept. We noted that they were both sourced in differentiated psukim. They did not agree on what pasuk was at play. On the face of it, that sounds like a semantic discussion. It's this pasuk, it's that pasuk. But of course, those of us who have a little more experience, and all of us on this call, of course, do, we know that it's never that simple, that obviously there are multiple layers beneath the surface that animate even the choice of what pasuk is the animating pasuk, controlling pasuk of a given halacha, and it'll make a difference in terms of how we'll understand its implications, and then the outgrowth of that is, of course, the halachic ramifications, sometimes from a practical perspective. So I want to do two things tonight, because where we left off last week was in the midst of a piece from Rav Yosef Dov Levi Soloveitchik from the Shimot Shiurim on Masechet Sukka that were written up by Rav Herschel Reichman Shlita, who is a Rosh Yeshiva today at Yeshiva University, Adi Yom Hazeh, and he wrote up the notes. We're going to see something, perhaps even a little footnote that he added on to his Rebbe's words. That's one track. The second piece is learning through the Gemara and Chavtat Amud Bet, and the beginning, actually most of, Lamed Amud Aleph, just really on a very surface level to get the basic language down about what is at play in the Gemara, what its priority is, which will help us to even further understand this whole concept of the lulav, hagazul, hayavesh, the dried out, the stolen lulav, the dried out lulav, and the way in which the two of them are related to each other, or perhaps related to some degree. We're going to see what the contrasts are as well. Well, that's just bringing us up to snuff as to what we're up to at the moment. In order to properly understand the rest of the piece from Rav Soloveitchik, believe it or not, we actually have to do part two before we do part one, meaning we have to see the Gemara inside, and we actually have to see another Tosafot, so that when we get to the Rav piece, I'm sorry, I know I was asked to send it out, and I did, but then as I was learning it through, I realized if you don't know what's going on in the Gemara, and you don't know what's going on in Tosafot at the bottom of Chavtet Amud Bet, you're going to be missing a pretty important part of the puzzle, and it's going to be challenging to understand how Rav Soloveitchik develops this thesis that he brought up. Just to remind you, the thesis itself was that Rashi chose to use the pasuk Zek Heli ve'anvehu not as a rhetorical flourish, but because in the Rav Soloveitchik's formulation, there are two types of ways of beautifying a mitzvah. Sometimes it is just as we would imagine, an enhancement on a standing mitzvah, but at other times it is a crucial feature of the mitzvah itself. How do you know which is in which category, which mitzvah go where, in what bin? So lulav, Rashi is signaling, is in the latter category. It's an integral part of the mitzvah. Now, why should that be so? That's what we're going to see. That's the rest of the Rav Soloveitchik piece, and then some proofs that he adduces to try to explain why there are two different tiers, practically, or two different applications or levels of application of Zek Heli ve'anvehu. This is my God, and I shall beautify him. Which, by the by, is not a normative section of Chumash. Yeah, it's not a section of mitzvot. So I want to ask you, well, pick a section that has mitzvahs in it in the Torah. You wouldn't reach for Shirat Hayam. It's just not. But it doesn't mean we don't want halachic material from it. Halachic material from Shirat Hayam, from Shirat Hazinu, as Chazal teach us. But it would be much more natural to say everything must be sourced really in the pasuk in chapter 23 of the book of Vayikra. I mentioned over Sukkot, I gave a shir between Mincha Marav, the second day of Sukkot, and I was just pointing out that not only the headquarters, but the only source for the mitzvah of the Daled Minim is in chapter 23 of Sefer Vayikra, pasuk Mem. That's it. The other references are to Chag HaSukkot and building a sukkah, and you do have other references. You have two in Shmot, in both Parshiot Mishpatim and Kitisa. You have in Bamidbar, obviously, in Parshat Pinchas, and then in Sefer Dvarim in Parshat Re'eh. The only place where we have it's not just the headquarters, it's the only real source that we have. One pasuk. We're going to see that pasuk again a little later tonight. And therefore, it makes sense that the standards for that mitzvah are found in that actual pasuk. That was Tosafot's contention. We saw at the top of 29b. And the idea that for Tosafot, Zekeli Vanveu just means an enhancement on a mitzvah. That's what it means. You should beautify your mitzvahs. Don't do it in an ugly way or in a dilapidated manner or in a lackadaisical fashion. Enhance the objects. And then we saw that Gemara Masechet Shabbat of all the different kinds of mitzvot, or mitzvah objects, examples that are reduced thereof that involve being mahader, the mitzvah, or rather bringing beauty to the mitzvah, and that's what we're looking for. And once we've done that, that's great. And if we haven't done it, does not destroy the integrity of the mitzvah. But when it comes to the four species, there the pasuk, the single pasuk about its mitzvah, tells us that the first one on the list, the etrog, is a pre-eitz hadar, translated variously as the beautiful fruit. It's a fruit of pre-eitz hadar, the fruit of the tree, which is beautiful. That's basically how Chazal understand it. Therefore, it's a standard of hadar. And without that standard, we do not have something that we can use for this mitzvah. So for the Balei Tosfot, it's not that Zekeli Van Vehu has an enhancement tier and also times when it's a crucial element of the mitzvah. No, for the Balei Tosfot, Zekeli Van Vehu is always, it's a B'chol Torah Kula, an enhancement on the mitzvah, whatever the mitzvah might be. But it's not li'ikuva. But hadar, on the four species, the daled minim, it's li'ikuva. Now, when we understand that, we can now look into the Gemara itself. Haven't fully answered the question, I know, and again, I don't know if I should apologize for it, but I did send out those 2 pages and said, go, try to learn it through. Then I realized there's so many basic pieces of the puzzle that unless you learned it on your own, you'd be twisting in the wind. What is this? What is that? He's quoting a Tosfot, he's quoting a Gemara and Lamed Vav. What's going on? So let's learn through the Gemara. I'm doing part 2. I'm going to come back to part 1. I hope there'll be time. I assume there'll be time.
Can I come back to the Mishnah?
Questions? Wait, I didn't hear. 1 second. I didn't raise my volume. 1 second. Yehuda, please go ahead.
Yes. The first sentence in the Mishnah, even though it says lulav, I understand, maybe I'm wrong, that it really means arba minim, not just the lulav, correct? This is Rashi's interpretation.
Okay, no, so that's exactly what the first Rashi is trying to clarify this, that you might think it refers to multiple minim. It is only lulav because if you flip a few pages, there's a Mishnah that goes hadas hagazul vayavesh pasol, and there's a Mishnah that says arava, same thing.
I see.
And then of course we're gonna have to ask the question when we get there. Well, why couldn't it all be included together with the lulav? Remember, we saw this a little bit last time, that the lulav, whether it's because it's the tallest of the species, whether it's because it's the most prominent. Remember the bracha syntax,
Lulav, yeah.
Right? And there the lulav, the word lulav means not just the lulav, but all of the bundle. Rashi here clarifies this is just the lulav. And we're going to see further along the other elements. Remember last time we also talked about, I won't go down that road again, why start with lulav and not etrog if it's the first one in the pasuk. So we talked about that. But your question is a good one. And thanks for helping us clarify that again. Going into this, it's just the lulav because there's going to be a separate one. As Rashi says, separate for the hadas, separate for the arava. And when you just learn through Mishnayot, you keep scratching your head and saying, couldn't it economize just write lulav, hadas, arava in one Mishnah? We'd have to give me 3 different Mishnayot with basically what looks like, a repetitious syntax in triplicate. Just give me one. But Rashi says, no, that there are separate Mishnayot coming, so this is just about the lulav.
The arava is obviously the most vulnerable.
Yes, so we'll get there. We'll get there.
To me, this month.
Right. Yeah, well, we'll get there. In Achinami, we will get there. We're going to have to get there and try to figure out what's going on with the arava as well. That will not be tonight. We will not get that far. Sure. So let's go into the Gemara a little bit. I had one hanging piece about the Mishnah that I wanted to just clarify for you, for everyone. And that was the question of, why is the Mishnah organized as it is? Here's things that are wrong with the lulav. The lulav that's stolen or the lulav that's dried out. That's no good. Then there's, if it's from it was worshipped as a Avodah Zarah, or if it was from an Ir Hanidachat, the city that's going to be destroyed because everyone, or the majority of the people worship the Avodah Zarah. Then it goes back and it says, and also if the top of it was cut off, also if all the leaves were broken off, that's also possible. So the question begs itself, if I was organizing it, if you were organizing it, you probably would say, here are the different things that make it pasul. Give me a list of all the things that are physically wrong with it. Then tell me the things that could be spiritually wrong with it. And then give me the times when it's kosher. You follow the logic? But instead, it gives you two things. Lulav hagazul ve'yavish, that's pasul. Then it moves over to not something about the object, but something related to its circumstance, about where it was located, or what was done in its presence. Then we come back to something about its physicality. So just two approaches here, just for your consideration, and then we'll jump into the Gemara. Number one, the Pnei Yoshua writes that these two are headlined in the Mishnah to underscore that the dried out lulav and its halacha is going to be the same halacha as the stolen lulav. They're both irredeemable. They're both impossible to be fixed, even after, in the case of the lulav hagazul, the stolen lulav, even after the rightful owner has abandoned their ownership rights over it. They just say, I'm never going to see it again. Forget it. I'll have to get a lulav. They go to the store to buy a new one. I'm never going to see that again. So then, technically speaking, I'm not talking about ethically, morally, but technically speaking, this lulav now belongs to the thief from a technical perspective. So the idea here, says the Pnei Yoshua, is these two, lulav hagazul and hayavesh, are put together and headlined as being pasul to underscore that whatever is going to be with the lulav yavesh is dried out. You can't, one second, Larry, you can't you can't rehydrate it. It's dried out and dead. You can't fix the lulav hagazul either. And so they're together. That's the Pnei Yoshua's approach. Larry, go ahead, please.
What if the rightful owner recovers the stolen lulav?
Good question. Tabling it for the moment. I got to table it for the moment. But it would be a real question. It would be a question on the first day, for sure. On the first day of the holiday, you have to own the lulav. So what does it mean he recovered it? He stole it back? Does it mean, right?
No, the thief got caught, and the police returned the lulav to the rightful
owner.
And you want to go on? Let's go on.
Yeah, I'm tabling it for now. Let's say not a simple answer. Not as simple as you would imagine because of what I just said. From a technical perspective, again, we're talking about the technicality of you have to own your own lulav on the first day of Sukkot. I'm sorry, you were still saying something? I didn't hear you.
No, the Gazlan made a kinyan, even though he came to it wrongly.
Yeah.
He made a kinyan.
It's not clear that can be undone by giving it back to its original owner.
Okay, let's move on. Thank you very much.
Yeah, not clear that it can happen. The Aruch Laner says there are. We're getting a lot of feedback. Can you everyone just mute your phone? So mute everyone again. Okay, thank you. The Aruch Laner writes that there are three groupings in this Mishnah. The first grouping is Gazul and Yavesh. That is a status that falls upon these two types of lulavim where the entire object of the lulav has been impacted and the entire object of the lulav is no good. In the second grouping, the Asherah Irani Dachat grouping, these are about events that have transpired outside of the object of the lulav itself, but impacted the entire lulav. So the whole lulav was worshipped, or the whole, or as part of the Asherah tree, or it was inside the confines of an Ir Hanidachat. In the third group of the leaves got broken off, etc., or it got lopped off on the top, let's say, was the first example. It's where it is the body of the lulav, but it's only a portion of the lulav. And the chiddush of the third grouping is, even if this partial element of the lulav, again, whether the top was lopped off or whether the leaves became detached and you're trying to tie it on with twine or something, in either of those cases, it is partially no good. It's partially missing, partially cut off, but it is entirely puzzle. So these are why the groupings are as they are. So you have, again, group number one is the entire lulav was impacted, and it's something about the object of the lulav per se. Yavesh means it is dried out completely, top to bottom. Gazul means, and that's the chiddush of the Mishnah, is that Yavesh and Gazul go in the same box. They're in the same container. The second one is the object looks like every other lulav you would buy at a nice store, but because of its history, it's something that happened external to itself. The object was not even moved. It was passive, but it happened to be in the environs of, or had someone facing it, bowing to it or something like that. That is affecting the entire lulav. And third, physical deformities, defects, etc., that are going to end up disqualifying it entirely. So three groupings. That's two approaches. Pnei Yeshua, Aruch Laner. Let's jump into the Gemara. Kapasik Vitani. The Gemara begins here, 29b. When we begin our voyage now. Most of the beginning of the Gemara just focused on the first four words of the Mishnah. So forget everything else. We're going to get back to it another night. Lulav hagazav yavesh pasel. Says the Gemara. Kapasik Vitani. Lo shna b'yom tov rishon, v'lo shna b'yom tov sheni. The Mishnah does not differentiate between the first day and the second day. Now, the word second day here is really a stand-in for any day other than the first day. Remember what we said last time, crucial. I'm not going to look up the sources again with you, but to remind you, as far as the Torah is concerned, there is a mitzvah around the world, universal, the first day of Sukkot, to take the Daled Minim. After that, there is a biblical mitzvah that continues to take the Lulav, Etrog, Hadassim, Aravot for all 7 days, only if you're in the Beit HaMikdash. When the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made one of his enactments was Zecher LaMikdash, and that Zecher LaMikdash was to take the four species on all the 7 days, inclusive of days 2 through 7, and the last 6 days, in other words, even though he did not have the power to make it a mitzvah de oraita, but he enacted as a mitzvah de rabbanan. This year, my friends, that's what we had. We observed the mitzvah as a mitzvah de rabbanan. I don't know about you. I still said a shachiyanu the first time I took it. It's still fulfilling a mitzvah. Happens not to be a mitzvah de oraita. Not this year, because the first day was Shabbat, which is his own sugya. We won't go into it now. That's a totally different discussion. Maybe we should have learned it before Yontif. I don't know, but too late now. And the idea here is that the Mishnah did not specify a distinction between day one, where everything is on a biblical level, and day two, where it's dropped down to a rabbinic level. So the Gemara says, Bishlama Yavesh. We understand why the lulav that is dried out, that's not going to be good on day 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Hadar BaInan vLeika. We need the standard of Hadar, of something, of it being beautiful, and we just don't have that. vLeika. Ella, and by the way, you should have the bells ringing now. We learned Rashi and Tosafot. Did Rashi not learn the Gemara? Why did Rashi, look back at Rashi, line 4 in Rashi, a lulav that's dried out is not good. So he wrote, you have to have a mitzvah mehuderet. As it says, ve'anveyu, I will beautify my God through the mitzvot. The Gemara says it's the word Hadar. So what do you think the word Hadar? Rashi says, the word Hadar here means ve'anveyu. Why didn't Rashi just reach for the regular pasuk? We have not answered that mystery. That's what the Rav did. We're going to get there. Patience. But just I'm signaling that's how deep the question goes. Not just Tosafot arguing against Rashi in the Mishnah of what this do. It's the best proof is it's right here in the Gemara. Ella Gazul Bishlam Yom Tov Rishon. I understand on the first day that if you have a stolen lulav, I understand that it won't work, that it's pasul dichtiv lachem. The Torah uses the expression ulekachtem lachem. Take for yourselves. And what do we learn from that word? Mishelachem, which means you need to own it. You cannot steal it. You also can't even borrow it. You cannot borrow someone else's daled minim on the first day of Sukkot. If you do, it doesn't work. So there's a whole patent. We'll see it ages and ages from now, where you can give it as a gift with the understanding the person's going to gift it back to you. You have to use that language. I hereby gift it to you. And they say, I gift it back to you. You say, well, that's a little bit of a, and it is. But the point is you have to own it. So, amai lo. Why not? The second day. So it's stolen. Big deal. Machloket. Tonight we'll see both sides of the machloket. I'm flying through it. I know I'm being very superficial. I apologize for the superficiality, but it's only with an eye towards coming back to dive deeper in the coming weeks. It's a very important sugya. B'Yom Tov Sheni on the second day, i.e., not just second day like second day of Yom Tov and Chutz La'aretz. It means second day, third day, all the way to the seventh day. Why is it also no good? The Mishnah, after all, did not say day 1 versus day 2 through 7. It just said if it's dried out on any day, no good, and if it's stolen any day, no good. So the Gemara said, well, on any day, including the days of the Rabbanan, if it lacks the status of being Hadar, then it's not part of the Daled Minim. And we have a principle in halacha that whatever called the takun rabbanon ke'ein deoraita takun, whatever the sages enact as an enactment, they will do it in the manner of and formulate it in the pattern of its biblical analog. They're just going to draw it out, right? So that's true to some extent, but maybe if it's stolen, that doesn't carry over. After all, on the other days, we know you can borrow it from someone else. We don't require you to own it. So that's the Gemara's point. Why not allow that on the second day? Yet we see the Mishnah says you're not allowed. Amar b'Yocham Shimon ben Yochai. This is indeed the Rashbi. What does it say? Mishum dahavale mitzvah haba ba'avera. It is a mitzvah that comes about as a result of a sin, an avera. Shenemar, as the pasuk teaches, v'aveitim gazul v'pisech v'achole. So you bring as offerings. It's one of the nevuot of great criticism against the Jewish people from the last of all prophets, Malachi, that criticizing those who bring offerings. I'll say it differently. The Jewish people say, "What do you want from us?" Said Hashem, "We bring you a lot of korbanot." So the Navi Malachi says, "Really? You bring me stolen, lame, ill animals." Right, it's a criticism. So says the Gemara, "Gazul dume de piseach." Stolen is just like lame. Ma piseach late takanta. If it's lame, it's a physical deformity that cannot be healed. So too, av gazul late takanta. You cannot fix it. There's no. It's a taint that disqualifies it. And when the Navi wanted to criticize the Jewish people, obviously he wasn't making it up on his own. God told him to say it. But the point is, stop bringing me these. You're claiming you're doing everything by the book, but don't you think God sees that you're bringing all of these things that are actually defective from a halachic vantage point to be brought as offerings? And the Gemara adds, "Loshna lifnei yesh, loshna la'achri yesh." It makes no difference if it's before the owner has given up ownership or if it is after the owner has relinquished ownership. Remember, we just talked about that before. You would say, from a technical perspective, if someone stole an object from another person, when the owner gives up the hope that he's going to get it back, so then the new person, thief, guilty, immoral, needs to pay restitution. If it's Geneva, he's going to pay kefil, all of that. Yes. But from a technical standpoint, he has acquired control and ownership of this object. Says the Gemara here, what is the concept of mitzvah baba avera? And we're learning it here. This is Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's Torah, that it is not possible to remove the taint of the fact that the history of this object is, it is an object that was acquired through ill-gotten gains, as an object. Now, we have to sharpen the definition of what this means, and we'll do that. Let's go through some more of the Gemara to get more of a flavor of what's going on, and I urge you to consider, I don't know about your heart, my heart is drawn to this idea from an ethical, moral perspective, but we should realize we're not in an ethical philosophy course over here. We're learning Gemara, and we're making legal arguments. And it's not that the law, Chalila, should be immoral or amoral, chas v'shalom. The point here of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is this object it's tainted, it's branded forever. But we should realize that there is another side, and we're going to see the other side shortly, that disagrees, that thinks that it is not true, that there's a mitzvah ba'avera component going on here. And then we'll have to ask, does that mean they don't hold of the idea at all, or just not in this context? Question mark, we'll get to that. But let's keep going. So, Adam ki yakriv mikem amarachmana, now a pasuk, actually from the beginning of Sefer Vayikra. Adam ki yakriv mikem, a human being, a man, their offer from within your midst, right? So giving a person will give a korban, will offer saying. So Adam ki yakriv mikem amarachmana v'lav didehu. Right, so the person has to give. It's actually Rashi on this pasuk in Chumash. You should give what belongs to you. Don't take from that which is stolen. The example there, Rashi on Chumash, is Adam Rishon. He also, even though technically everything was his for the taking, he didn't steal. He made sure that it was something that was his rightful object to be able to offer to Hashem. Adam ki yakriv mikem amar rachmana v'lav didehu. It's not his. It simply doesn't belong to him. You can't use it. But wait, after the owner has already given up ownership, the owner said, forget it, I'll never see it again. So isn't that now going to mean it belongs to the thief? No, it won't be effective for the simple reason that it is a mitzvah haba be'avera. Right? So that's mitzvah ba'avera. Now, there's a second limud. It's like the two pieces of testimony were lined up. We had here moments ago, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Now we have again, Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and we're going to hear the same concept. Give me a second, Mark. We hear the same concept taught again, but through another lens, which we'll get to momentarily. Mark, go ahead, please.
No, but I just want to be sure I understand. It's only a mitzvah haba be'avera if you hold that the status of the guzzle doesn't change. Right? Because he's saying once it's guzzle, even if the guy gives it back, or even it's after the transaction, it still holds that status of having been stolen.
Yeah.
So he's really not holding its mitzvah haba be'avera. He's holding more that the status of the lulav doesn't change once it has that status of being stolen.
Well, it is, as an object, it is ineligible to be used for a mitzvah, because it has now the status of mitzvah haba ba'avera.
Right, but even if it's acher
Yeush,
it's still, he's still holding that it's got that status. Otherwise,
that's the point.
I just want to be sure that's his driving point, is that it's whether it's lifnei or acher,
exactly,
it's still going to have that.
Correct. It's irredeemable. It's
right.
You cannot fix it.
So that's sort of Larry's point from before.
Yeah, but Larry was adding another layer. Larry was saying, now what if the cops bring the guy back, the original guy back? Here, we found your lulav. Well, it's not mine anymore because the other guy owns it. So am I allowed to take back the lulav that was out of my possession, belonging to somebody else?
But according to Rav Yochanan or Rav Shimon, he would say no, regardless. It's got that. Okay, thank you.
And it's inherent in inheres within the object. Right, because it has had this experience that it is an object that was stolen. You cannot use it now.
Right.
Okay. As if it is tainted from the minute it is stolen on.
Yes. Correct. And it can no longer be admitted as part of a service of Hashem. It's too late. Stuck. So now I'll show you the second. We're early. I don't consider us too late for Sukkot. We are now preparing for Sukkot. Tafshin Pei Bet Haba Aleinu L'Tova. So you're going to have a beautiful Dvar Torah for next year. It's from right here, middle of the page. It's another way of teaching the same teaching, and of course, not for tonight, but for another night. Why do we have to hear it 2 times? Just to be fun? Just because it's nice? So it's not so simple. There's something between these two, which I'm not going to get into now. But V'am Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Ben Yochai. I'm in the middle, toward a third of the way down the quarter of the way down the page. Start of the line is my dichtiv. My dichtiv ki ani Hashem ohev mishpat soneg gezel be'olam. What does it mean when the pasuk says in Sefer Yeshayahu, I am Hashem who loves justice, and I hate thievery when it has to do with offerings. I hate thievery in general, but especially when it has to do with offerings, burnt offerings. Mashal lemelech basar v'dam shaya over al beit hameches. The king was coming to the toll booth. Amar la'avadav tnu meches lamochsim. And the king tells his underlings, go pay the toll. Amru lo v'halochol hameches kulo shilchahu. Sire, they're bringing all the taxation for the toll. It's coming to you. It's to your, back to your coffers. You're paying yourself. Amar lahem mimeni yilmedu kol ovrei drachim v'liavrichu atzman min hameches. Let all of the people learn from my modeling to them. I don't want anyone to think that they should be trying to escape or get out of having to pay the tax. How will I do that? I'll pay the tax. I'll pay the toll. So the king modeling for the subjects by not stealing, even though technically everything already belongs to the king. So it's like paying himself. But I'm going to go through the motions. Yeah? So, yeah, so it's the same thing with Hashem. So the same thing, right? Mimani ilmadu banai ve'avrichu atzman min hagaza. Itmar nami, another limud. Amar Rabbi Ami yavish pasul mipnei she'ein hadar. Gazul pasul mishum dahavel lemitzvah baba aveira. So another limud, Rabbi Ami, later generation of Amora. Yep, that's what Rabbi Yochanan quoted from Mishum Ben Yochai. And that's what it is. This is the case of mitzvah baba avera, and you cannot use it. That's what the Mishnah is referring to. Upligi de Rabbi Yitzchak. This is the argument on the other side of this is by Rabbi Yitzchak. The Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmeni Amar Shmuel lo shanu ela b'yom tov rishon. The Mishnah is actually only talking about the first day of Yom Tov. Aval b'yom tov sheni mitoch sheyotze b'shaul. Just as you can use a borrowed lulav, yotze nami begazol. You could be yotze with a stolen lulav as well. That's the other side of the argument. Further along, now we're on the other side of the aisle. Yeah, Meitiv Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak lulav hagazol yavesh pasul. So here also the same thing. Wait a minute, it says lulav hagazol yavesh is pasul. So we're trying to understand. We have here gazul, doesn't say shaul. So hashaul kosher. So the shaul, the one that is borrowed, that is kosher, right? So you have to try to understand this. Wait a second. Eimat. When is the Mishnah speaking? If it's talking about only the first day, haktiv lachem mishalachem. We already know the pasuk is very clear. It says, "L'kachtem lachem," take for yourselves, and that means belonging to you. V'hai but it doesn't belong to him. You can't use it on the first day, regardless of why. El alav b'yom tov sheni. It must be that the Mishnah is really talking about Yom Tov Sheni, because that's where it's a chiddush. The katani gazul pasul, and therefore it taught specifically gazul pasul, because that's a chiddush. Because on day one, not gazul and not shaul, nothing. It has to belong to you affirmatively. And the Gemara here then has a little conclusion where Rava weighs in. Amar Rava, it says Rava Amar should be Amar Rava. La'olam b'yom tov rishon. No, the first Mishnah, the Mishnah here really is talking about the first day only. It goes without saying, is being taught here. And it goes without saying syntax. Of course, need not mention a borrowed lulav, delav dideu, because it doesn't belong to the individual at all. If I borrow something from you, the implication of the words, may I borrow this, in the words, the very words mean you will continue to own it. I'm just using it for a few minutes. So that didn't have to be mentioned in the Mishnah. Aval gazul, but stolen, ema, you would have thought, you might have made some kind of calculation that stam gzela yehush bailimhu. That stam, when one person grabs from another and says, I have stolen it from you and runs away, that the owners automatically have given up, right? That's it. And therefore, uchedidei dami. And now the lulav, though it came to his hand through ill-gotten gains, but the reality is now he owns it, the thief, and therefore he could use it. No, kamash malan. Therefore, we learn that no, a thief who steals a lulav may not use it, even if there was the yeush of the BaInan on day one. But let me try to say this with the names of the people. According to Rabbi Yochanan, in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and according to the approach of Rabbi Ami, there is a reality of mitzvah haba be'avera. It's true on day one, and it's especially true on day two. For sure, day two. The main chiddush is day two. Comes Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani, comes Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, and they disagree. And they say, no, the Mishnah is actually talking about only one thing, Yom Tov Harishon. Sorry, only Rabbi Yitzchak says only talking about Yom Harishon. Then comes Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. He holds that it must be about the second day, but that the chiddush is it's also possible on the second day because the same standard of lachem mishalachem carries over from day one to day two. And Rava says no, the Mishnah is just about day one. Why did it leave out Sha'ul and only say Gazul? What left out borrowed and only said stolen? Because with borrowed, everybody agrees it doesn't belong to you. You actually say in the words, may I borrow this, means you are going to retain your ownership. But when someone says, I've stolen this from you, the implication is, and you will never get it back. And now I'm the new owner. You might think, well, that's okay. No, that's also not okay. But it's not clear from Rava that that's true because of mitzvah baba aveira. See, and this again, we have to keep ourselves focused on the on the halachic approach here, which is not, again, not God forbid immoral. Certainly, it's not amoral, but we're trying to make a halachic argument. And I get drawn each time. Beautiful mitzvah baba aveira, the taint of the object. Yeah, that's one approach, but not everybody agreed that that's what's going on in this Mishnah. Everyone agrees there's something called mitzvah baba aveira. It's not clear that we apply it here. And so you have these two different approaches. This is the basic piece of the Gemara. There's what comes after this is already, it's related, but it's already another snippet. We're not going to get there tonight. Everybody with me so far? Okay, good. Now what we're going to do, we're still in phase 2 over here. I remember I said I'm flipping it. We're doing the spade work. We just did the spade work. Took us 38 minutes. Now we're going to see Tosafot, the bottom of 29b. After we see Tosafot on 29b, then we're going to go back to the Rav and understand what the Rav was doing to try to answer what's going on there in Rashi. And you note that the whole Rashi is what? 3, 4, 5 words long. Yeah? The whole little Rashi on the Mishnah. Yavish, the BaInan, mitzvah, mehuderet, dichtiv, anveu. 5 words. So the Rav's going to try to explain what's going on in that trenchant formulation and why Rashi didn't obviously reach for the word Hadar. Why he thought in the pasuk, in the original pasuk itself. Now, in order to understand this Tosafot that we're going to open up now, I'm putting on the screen just for a minute a pasuk that we know very well, and I want you to appreciate what's going on. There's an exegesis going on by the Tosafot, meaning to say they're doing, lahavdil fe'avdalat, what you call in literature a close reading, but we have the principle of omni-significance. The Torah does not skimp on words. It does not use superfluous words. If something's there, there's a meaning to it. If failure is on us, maybe we couldn't tease it out, or the tradition will teach us what it is. Look how this is formulated. We have here, lekachtem lachem, take for yourselves. Note that it's in the plural. That's going to be significant. The fact it's plural as opposed to the singular. And you could say, well, a lot of things are in plural. A lot of things, we're going to see a contrast in this Tosafot. Lachem, for yourselves. We talked a little bit about that already. Lachem mishalachem, you have to own it personally. Then we learn about the time frame, Bayom Harishon, and then we have the names of the different species themselves. And then we have, and this is all on the first day. Then we have, you should be joyous before Hashem your God, which Chazal understand to mean you're in front of Hashem everywhere. But what does this narrowly defined mean? Only in the Beit HaMikdash for 7 days. Okay? Now, note that it did not say, Ulekachtem lachem, pre-eitz hadar kapotrim v'anaf eitzavot v'arvei nachal, bayom harishon, comma, usmach mithnei Hashem elokechem shivat yamim. It said instead, "Ulekachtem lachem," take for yourselves. Then it told you the when, and then it told you the what, and then it went back to another when. You see what went on here? There's something like disjointed in the pasuk. It's not an accident. The Tosafot, laser focused, are going to go through this pasuk and try to help us understand their point of view. I'm on the bottom Tosafot here. They're trying to explain what exactly did the Gemara mean when it said that you need Hadar and you no longer have Hadar on day 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Because you could have read, look at this pasuk carefully again. Look, one last thing on the screen, and then we're going into Tosafot. You should take each of you take that which belongs to you and to no one else. On the first day, it has to be a pre-Eitz Hadar kapotrim of anafetz avot arvei nachal. But what if it's after the first day? Does it have to still be Hadar? The Gemara took as an assumption, yes, it still has to be Hadar. Tosafot said, why? Why do we think that's so true? Maybe it's also only limited to only on the first day. That component of it. Now again, there's a lot going on over here. This mitzvah over here is only a one-day mitzvah. Deoraita. Dirabanan, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, we don't have a mikdash. We will be the standard bearers of memory. We will make wherever we are as if we are, as lifnei Hashem Elokeichem, even though we're not really with a Beit HaMikdash. So we'll have 7 days worth of it. I'm not going to claim that it's Deoraita. It's still only Dirabanan. Fine. But when you open the Gemara goes like this. Well, the Gemara opens with, Lulav hagazov hayavesh pasul. Well, we understand why Yavesh is pasul. Yavesh is pasul on day 1. Okay, that's because it says so in the Torah. Why is it pasul on day 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? Well, that's a given. Obviously, Yavesh is pasul. The Torah say, obvious? Why? Why should that be obvious? Why should you say that? And remember, the question of the Gemara was, well, what about stealing? The first day, we know it can't be stolen. Why? Because the Torah says, lachem has to belong to you. But after the first day, if it belonged to somebody else, if you borrowed it from someone else, you could borrow it from someone else. And you could even, you're not allowed, you could, if you stole it, it would be yours. It's not from a halachic vantage point, strictly from a legal perspective, it's not worse than borrowing. It's better than borrowing in terms of ownership, not in terms of morality. That's for sure. But you understand what I'm saying? Is it clear?
Rabbi, why couldn't the pasuk have been starting on the first day?
Yeah.
The Arba Minim are Doraisa.
I'm sorry.
And then part of the joy of the holiday is having the Arba Minim, and the only way to have the Simcha L'fnei Hashem for 7 days is to have a kosher lulav and esrog and hadasim and aravos.
Good. Excellent. It turns on these words. The fact that the Torah said Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem, whenever the Torah uses the expression Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem for reasons I simply cannot prove to you now, it takes too long, it always means the reference is in the Makom HaMikdash. Okay. Of course, I'd give a Dvar Torah like you would, and you say, like, God is everywhere. That's true, but there's a sort of a more focused definition of what this means in this context, which is it means specifically the place of the Mikdash. The question was asked, but privately, so I don't know if he wants to be outed. When the Beit HaMikdash existed, what is the authority for the Arba Minim being Doraita for all 7 days? It's right here. I hope that just answered the question. Maybe I was just off in my timing. But if it's not, feel free to raise your hand and speak now, or forever hold your peace. But that's Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem. The halachic understanding of these words, our Masorah is whenever the Torah uses expression, particularly I don't know what I just did now. Oh, concordance. Who knew? I didn't know we had this. See, I'm discovering new things too. Okay, so you see here, I'll give you an example. This was totally by accident. This was not scripted, my friends. Not scripted, right? Sefer Dvarim, Parshat Re'eh. Usmach Mifnei Hashem Elokeichem refers to being in Yerushalayim. You should eat the meat that you're going to eat. V'samach Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem b'chol mishlach yadecha. Yeah, this is Maser Sheni that you're taking up. That's in Yerushalayim, and so on and so forth. Yeah, whenever it's Lifnei Hashem, That's the expression. I mean, whatever. Those are the main examples of it, actually. But okay, that was not planned. Go figure. I don't even know how to get back to. Oh, here, turn that off. There we go. I'm back to Bereshit. Forget it. All right, you got the point. Yeah. Let's go.
Is a borrowed lulav permitted in the Beis Hamikdash any day?
A borrowed lulav is permitted in the Beit Hamikdash on. Oh, that's a good question. Is the borrowed lulav, so you don't own it on any days, lachem mishalachem, operative on the other days in the mikdash, min hastam, you cannot borrow in the mikdash on the other days either. Right. That's correct.
Definitely by Yom HaRishon. Huh?
Yeah, but Chuck's asking, what about the other days? And the answer is, yeah, that it's a biblical mitzvah that has to belong to you all the days in the mikdash. Yes, that's my recollection. Yes. So and therefore the question becomes, well, is that going to be extrapolated also to the rest of the 7 days, which are only d'Rabbanan? No, we're not going to do that. We're not. We're extrapolating the Hadar piece for all 7 days. Look with me at Tosafot, bottom of the page. BaInan Hadar vLeika. We need Hadar, and we don't have that. Mashma de pshita le de BaInan Hadar lekula yome. It sounds as if it's obvious that we need Hadar for all 7 days, i.e. days 2 through 7, but we don't need Lachem Mishalachem. That has to be yours, meaning you are the exclusive owner on the other days, other than on the first day. V'chein ulekachtem, the word ulekachtem, which is in the plural, Dimamatinan mine chaser. BaInan lekichatama. Tosafot assumes that you already somehow know all of these concepts, so you need a Sherpa, that's me, to guide you through the dense pieces. There's a drasha that the words ulekachtem lachem, that when it says ulekachtem, I'm back on the screen if you're looking up at the screen for a minute, is read also as v'lakachta tam. You need to take a complete taking. Complete taking means that none of the elements listed herein can be missing parts. Lekichatama. We'll soon see there's a second definition of what lekichatama means. I'll tell you now, actually. 2 definitions. Definition number 1 is it must be a complete, all the objects you take, the lulav, the etrog, they can't have parts missing. Definition number 2 is you need to pick up all 4 of these species. They're not standalone, but they require all 4. If you have just 3 of them, you're not fulfilling the mitzvah. If you pick up 1, it's not good. They're not 4 independent mitzvahs, they're 1 big mitzvah of a bundle. So here, Tosafot says, wait a second. From the word ulekachtem, we learn from this that chaser is not good. If any of the elements are missing part of themselves, that's not good. BaInan lekichatama. Yet lo mifsal el b'yom tov rishon. But that rule, this rule, I'm highlighting the word still on the screen in front of you. Ulekachtem v'lakachta tam. Take a whole. Tam means something whole, complete. So that's only true on the first day. Kidamin lekama b'pirka. We're going to see later on page 36b, lamed vav and bet. V'chanina matbil bei b'yom tov sheni v'nafik bei. It's a strange line, I'll grant you, but Rabbi Chanina, he would cut off little slices of the bottom of his etrog and dip them and eat them. And then with the main part of the etrog that was left, the top portion of it, do not try this at home, he would make a bracha. It would be Yotzei the mitzvah. Some of the Rishonim ask, how is that possible again? How could he take an object that is huktzah l'mitzvato and eat it? You're not allowed to eat your etrog in the middle of Sukkot. Some of the Rishonim, I think in a way to bail out Rabbi Chanina, say, well, he had an etrog for each day. He was a wealthy man. So he had an etrog for day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6. Day 1, he would not be able to touch it. But day 2 already, he had his own etrog for day 2. So once he did the mitzvah, he knew he had already one designated for day 3. So this is only for day 2. So in the late afternoon, he cut off a little slice, or on day 3, he ate from day 2's etrog, etc. You could kvetch it, yeah? But all right. But that is a Gemara. The Tema, And the question is, here's the question. Maishna zemizeh. What's the difference between one and the other? What is exactly the real difference between one of these statements and the other? Here we say, oh, that's for all 7 days. Hadar, over here in our pasuk, right here. That's for all time. That's for all 7 days. But this is not for all 7 days. This is for 7 days. That's not for 7 days. That's for 7 days, and maybe that's not for 7 days. So, like, really, why are we playing a game? That's what Tosafot is saying. Who's deciding what is in and what's out and what's being extrapolated to the world of fulfilling the mitzvah of Daled Minim D'Rabbanan? The Gemara took as a given that, of course, Hadar is part of it. Doesn't seem so clear. So the Gemara here, and that's the question. That's the beginning of the question. Yeah. The Gemara, the Tosafot goes on. The whole thing is in one pasuk. All of these limudim, all of these all these different principles, these different components that we need to know about for the Daled Minim, they're all in the same pasuk. Ulakavtem lachem bayom harishon pri eitz hadar. Right? The whole thing is on the first day. This is what you do. V'imishum demashmalei dahanich dichtive mikmei b'yom rishon. If you want to argue with me and say, oh, you know what's going on here? Now, here's where we need the visual. I can't do this without a visual. I will say, without Zoom, I don't know how we would do this together because it'd be too confusing. I'd be moving my hands a lot. If you want to argue, say the Baalei Tosafot, oh, you know what? These two words are a hinge. Everything, if you want to argue, everything after these two words, well, that's going to apply 7 days. But anything that's before the two words, that only applies on the first day. So, in other words, I can't believe I messed it up again. Excuse me. Wish I know what I was doing. Sorry. If you're going to, I'll just keep talking through it here. So hopefully you don't hang up on me. If you're going to say that it's all a function of what goes on the first day, and that's all we care about. So you say, when is ulakachtem lachem operative? Bayom harishon. But what are the components you need for the other days too, that are inherent within the objects themselves? Oh, that's Hadar, et cetera, whatever the other principles might be. So if you're going to argue that with me, you're going to claim that, right? Imishum demashmalei dahane dichtive mikmei b'yom rishon, since it says v'kachtem lachem, and we learned that it has to be yours, not stolen, has to be shalem, right? That's all before b'yom rishon. So wait a minute. So then, you want to argue? You want to say that alei kaimi, that all of that is only for the first day that it's possible? But maybe you want to argue that even the word hadar, val hadar batre, that comes after Yom Rishon. So maybe you don't need hadar after Yom Rishon. It's like you're playing a word game. That this doesn't. The Baalei Tosafot would say this isn't going to work. You know why it's not going to work? We're still going to have a problem. Let me say it again. I hope it was clear. I'm worried I convoluted it too much. If you want to hold, look, these two standards only apply on the first day. But every standard, I did it again. But all the other standards obtain. Let's try it one more time. I don't know how I'm going to keep doing this. I'm clicking it. Too excited. But all the other standards apply for all the days, such as Hadar, that's inherent within the object. Let me point out the following problem. Here's the problem. The akati kashi, we still have a problem. Milichtiv ulekachtem, first word. And we don't just learn that it has to be whole on the first day, but we learn also b'hakometz rabba dashin b'hakometz rabba ulekama pirkin and daf lamed dalam bet. There are ba mini shibalul ma'akvin zeds that we need all 4 species on any day that you take it. Day 2, 3, 4, 5, as well as the first day. You need to take them all. And if you're going to try to argue that these conditions only apply by a Marishon, and anything that comes after the words by a Marishon applies all 7 days, then what are you going to do with the fact that we still take from this word here the obligation that every time you take it, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all those days, you need to take all 4 species. Clearly, that was carried over. So you're taking one part and not the other part. It's like sort of selective. So you can't argue with me that there's some kind of break going on here and that the words by Mauritian only obtain for these requirement, since this requirement has a second rule connected to it as well, of lekicha tama. And also, you see also, ubeshilhi pirkin, ubereish lulava rava, darshinanami, you also learn, midichtiv ulekachtem lashon rabin, the fact that this word is plural, as opposed to singular. We have a third thing that we learn, which is the fact that it's in plural means that every individual must do it, as opposed to the BaInan doing it, representing all of the Jews of the world. What's another example of this? Anybody remember another example where this is true? Where the fact that it's in plural form tells us that every individual has to accomplish the mitzvah?
Korban Pesach.
Korban Pesach, good example. Good example. The one I was thinking of was just after Pesach. Usfartem lachem mechorat Shabbat.
Yeah.
Now, the count of the days of Sfira, every individual has to count. Why don't we just have the rabbi make the bracha, count, and he's done. We're done.
No.
No, every Jew has to do it. Contrast that with the Parsha of Yovel, the counting of the 7 years, counting the cycle, where the Torah goes out of its way at the end of Sefer Vayikra to say, where's my Balkori? No? V'safarta lecha, singular. And from here, the Gemara learns the BaInan will cover the count. Individuals are not obligated to do the count. So now the Tosafot would say, we're just sort of beating it further. There's three things we learned from the word ulekachtem. One, that on day one, it can't be missing pieces. Two, that on all the days, you have to pick up all four species. Three, that every individual performs the mitzvah. So the BaInan would say, we just shot through, like Swiss cheese, the argument that all the two words ulekachtem lachem come before the words by Rishon, and therefore they're only limited to the first day, which brings back the question. So how do we know that Hadar is for all the days, and how do we know that Gazul is not for all the days? We're going to require, remember, the Gemara Chavtet Amud Bet has a big chidush, mitzvah baba avera, at least according to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So back to Tosafot. Every individual has to take it. It wasn't the singular. We learn also with regard to, here's the example, Sfira Omer. What do we have? Sfira l'chol echad ve'echad midichtiv usfartem lashon rabim. That was in the plural, right? And so we have here. Therefore, we have bishar hayamim tizki b'min echad. Right? You might have thought that you could only take one. You only have to take one if you want to really argue that it's only for the first day. So the other days you could just pick up one. Today I took Adasim, tomorrow Ravot, nothing doing. Right? We see that that's not true. Lekach nira dahainu taima. We see that it must be that the reason why later on we maintain that we need to take all four is mishum diyam rishon deoraita bigvulin. On the first day, this halacha obtains deoraita everywhere in the world, even outside of the Makom HaMikdash. Ushar yomi derabbanan. The other days it's going to be rabbinic in stature. Why? Zeichel HaMikdash. Kirita b'reish lulav harava. Hilkach be'ikar halakicha kigon dalad minin. Ulakicha l'chol echad. And therefore, in the manner of the actual act of taking, it has to be in the same manner that we did it the first day, 4 species. And the lekicha, the object itself, is done by each and every person. It was enacted that way. Bishar yome ke'ein deoraita. Remember, I used this expression earlier tonight, but I didn't explain it too well. Kol de takun rabbanan ke'ein deoraita takun. Whenever the chachamim make an enactment, they do it in the manner of its deoraita analog. You don't make it up out of a whole cloth. They're just extrapolating from deoraita to the rabbanan level. V'chein b'hadar, and therefore the standard of hadar of day one, it can't be dried out, it has to look nice, is going to also follow through for all the subsequent days as well. Bishar yome ke'ein deoraita, v'chein b'hadar mishum hidur mitzvah. What's their definition of hidur mitzvah? Be careful, not zekili vanvehu, but pre-eitz hadar in the pasuk that I keep putting on the screen. Aval b'chaser uv'shaul lo takun. But when it came to chaser and shaul, those two elements that you're missing a little piece from the bottom, or if you bought it from someone else, that's not part of the takana that they made. Uv'gazul, and therefore when it comes to stealing, that's the pluta de shmaitin. That's the argument that's going on in the Gemara here. The Rabbi Yochanan suffered the takun when the Chachamim made their enactment of the other 6 days, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, to also take the Daled Minim. He thinks that also extrapolated from Deoraita into the world of Rabbanan is the prohibition on Gazul. How come? Mishum mitzvah baba aveira. Shmuel savar. We saw Shmuel was further along, was on page Lamed Amid Aleph. He holds the Latakun. But according to Shmuel, further along, there was no such extrapolation because it's not inherent in the object itself. Remember, we keep saying if it's a stolen item, but you could use a borrowed item on the second day, because Chazal, when they did Kol Takun Rabban Ke'ein Doraita Takun, what did they do? They extrapolated aspects that have to do with the fulfillment of the act of the mitzvah, and that have to do with the appearance of the object. But the status of the object, if I borrowed it from someone else, or if it's missing a piece, but the most of it is still there, that they permitted on days 2 through 7. So what Tosafot did here, to sum up, is Tosafot basically tried to explain why is it that the Gemara thought it was so obvious, BaInan, Hadar, vLeika, we need Hadar, and we don't have that, but it wasn't obvious with regard to Gazul. And what they finally do show is, well, here's the distinction between the two. One is the actual, called the Takun Rabbanan Ke'ein Doraita Takun, that's extrapolated from Doraita to Rabbanan, the Zeichel Mikdash. And the other one is a technical aspect of Lachem Mishalachem that was not drawn across. It's just not part of it. The Lachem, stayed only on day 1. But this...
That would be Rabbi, if... Go on.
No, I was going to say, but this one, L'kachtem, the first halacha we learned that has to be a whole object, that's only on day 1. But Limud number 2, that it has to be all 4 species. And Limud number 3, that it has to actually be done by each and every Jew, that is taken across the bridge from Deoraita into the world of the Rabbanan. Okay, Ira, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, so that's the halacha that if Chalila, someone's pitum falls off and it's the first day of Yantiv, he can't use it, but he could use it the other days because
but it also depends.
Depends where it's broken.
Yeah, but practically I'm leaving out some things here, which is when he's talking about chaser, if the chaser is actually a piece missing from inside, it's not clear you can still make the bracha. If the pitum is lopped off from the top after day 1, if there's a little bit still sticking out of the fruit, it's just chanting him off, that's still good. But if it actually has a depression, a hole in the top third of it, that's not so clear practically that would still be a kosher one, even for days 2 through 7. But you're right. That's why we're obsessive on day 1. But that's why we're obsessive on day 1.
Yeah.
Day 1, you Yotze the mitzvah, if it's missing any part, anywhere. After that, it's looser, at least for the lower portion of it, according to everybody. Okay. And some want to hold at the top also with little chaser, but generally it's not actually the halacha l'maaseh. We never got to part 1 tonight. We did part 2, but part 2 undergirds what we're going to do. So come back next week when I'll actually open up the Rav and we'll see it inside and we'll learn it properly. And you have now, if you want to read through the section from the Rav, the second page, you can probably make sense of it on your own. You want to take homework for next week for those who are so inclined. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you all for your time.
Rabbi.
And we'll meet again next week, Monday night.
I want to say something to you, if I may.
I would love to hear it.
Okay.